and welcome back to this clash between LEC and LCK, where SK Telecom T1 took down G2 Esports, who are on your screen right now in the ready room, reviewing their decisions and discussing what's going to happen in Game 2. G2 Esports have side selection in Game 2. They have elected blue side Vedius, and as it stands, the question of Sona Tarek, how does that impact the draft? And also, what does blue side do to help G2?
Wow. I think it means that they get priority on things, which means that they don't have to put as much focus onto banning the Ryze and the Akali. You can force the opposition into doing that. My biggest question mark is how much can G2 afford to give away the Jarvan? Because to me, it felt like coming into the draft, they had a very clear game plan in mind. But as Papa Smithy was alluding to, when you see the Sona Tarek being available and you see the Tahm Kench ban and you're like, oh, this is actually quite a pivot from what we originally planned. I think that they then put this composition together, and it's not like that they don't know how to play this comp. It's just, I don't think that this was the mentality that they had coming into Game 1, and I don't think they showcased as much as what they typically did during the finals of the LEC.
And I think it's fair to say, because G2 is a very opportunistic team, whether it's their in-game style or even their pick bans, they can say, oh, this is available, this is what it causes, these are the ripple effects we can get out of a pick like this, and we'll try to make it work. But it felt like SKT was so prepared for them to go for this tasty morsel that was offered that it kind of blew up in their face this time.
And the answer of the karma seemed to work wonders. Very useful through all stages of the game. And I like the word opportunistic is a very good word to describe G2 style. Something that we've been throwing around was explosive. And sometimes if you hold a grenade in your hand, it will hurt you. And that's what that Sona Tarek ended up doing to some degree. Now, I don't think it was the draft. I think it was decision-making in-game. We saw in the rollout just before that previous game, you know, watching Perks getting caught early, watching Caps running into two members. Those mistakes you cannot offer a team like SKT, who have one of the cleanest early games of the tournament.
I mean, so this is the bit where I then get into the controversy of was it not a good draft? Because the reality is, it feels to me like G2 gave too much control to SKT in the other game. They had a stronger 2v2 mid. They had priority in all three lanes on the side of SKT. And it felt like the SKT just had so many options. It got to a point where they had too many options. And every time G2 tried to make a play, SKT always had an answer.
You're kind of holding two ideas in your head. Was how do we beat SKT last time, and what's a theoretical way to beat SKT? And they erred away from what worked in the past, but we're living in the present. G2 versus SKT, G2 picking blue side, and you got an answer on one question, Vedius, the Jarvan, straight off the board.
I love this from G2. I love the respect being shown towards Clid. I've said it multiple times. I still believe it. He is by far and away the best Jarvan player in the world, and we didn't even get to see him in some of the big team fights where I think he truly excels. So SKT now, being on the red side, forced to ban away some of these big flex picks.
See what's left open is kind of my thought here, because you can only opt into flex banning on one side. You don't necessarily have to have all five off the board. The Jace first pick for SKT was such a big one. Second time they met, the Jace is very high priority because you kind of fall into double AP solo lanes a lot. So finding physical damage somewhere takes away the burden of the drafting in other roles. So
SKT actually going to show that respect and take the Jace off the board rather. Akali, Sylas, Aurelia all up and available. What it showcased so far is that SKT are fine giving away the Aurelia. We're actually even seeing the Kalista ban come out from the side of G2, I believe. Teddy, yet to die on the champion purpose.
Yet to die in 4 games, huge KDA on that one. Remember, it's a bit of a coverage to Tahm Kench as well, which is something that G2 have played around with. SKT have been loving Kalista into Tahm Kench because of that ability to put in the Ren stacks, delay the burst till afterwards. They actually choose to ban Tahm Kench anyway.
That actually surprises me, that SKT are so adamant to take this Tahm Kench away from G2. I feel like that given they are on the red side, you would expect G2 to prioritize one of the flex picks, and if they value it that much, they could have gone for it themselves, but they're actually just taking it off the board.
Akali, Aurelia, Sylas, all open and available. Sylas and Akali locked in. Who gets it? That's going to be the interesting question.
Ooh. Speaking of gets, the Rakan priority from Mada on the red side. Xayah Rakan has been Perks and Mickey's fallback duo when they're not going for Varus and Tahm Kench. So seeing this here is very, very interesting. Now, it could, of course, be ripped away. Kalista Rakan was a old duo before, but the Callista's banned here. I don't know if Xayah will be preferred. And they're just taking a straight up Draven.
Okay, so my question was, okay, now that the Galio is gone, who's considered like a decent pick into the Xayah Rakan lane, where did G2 look to focus? Their immediate response is, well, we think the Morgana Black Shield is really strong against the Rakan, and we're going to pair it up with an even stronger laner in the form of the Draven.
And it's intriguing because this started off in NA a year ago, maybe it's 2 years ago now, with Caitlyn Morgana against Xayah Rakan. It evolved into Varus Morgana. When we saw at this tournament, the Draven is another level of aggression, and it tells me they just want to kill Mata every time he goes in, just kill the Rakan with his very meager base stats.
And the bright side for G2 this time around is they actually have priority in the bot lane. With the Draven Morgana, you should have early push, you should be able to win out on trades. The thing you have to show the most respect for is the potential enemy jungle ganks. And what we've noticed is that Rek'Sai has actually slipped its way all the way through the draft. So I wonder now if G2 look to target ban some of the junglers, or if their focus is on trying to mitigate some of the good matchups into a card.
It's a G2 and SKT thing. I think
point.
it's definitely going to be jungle ban. So this means that some of those pocket picks, the Lee Sin, for example, is one you would imagine G2 is either going to leave up intentionally or have a very easy answer to. So given all of that, we'll see what direction we go, because we saw the Skarner finally come out yesterday. Captain Flowers, of course, ecstatic about that. Good matchup, but it's something that I've kind of been calling for Jankos to lock in and Rek'Sai matchups earlier in this tournament. That's not something he's looked to.
Hasn't yet, but let's see what happens as Lee Sin and Olaf are banned and removed from the pool. We're entering deep into phase 2 of the draft, and it's amazing what just a couple of days of preparation can do. Some big surprises already in the draft, and SK Telecom will remove that Irelia, last of the big 3 flex picks. G2 Esports have 1 ban left remaining, and then SKT will most likely lock in a jungler, you would assume, if they have already had so many champions pinched from the pool.
It's definitely what you're looking to do with this pick here, so you offer a true counter pick to either Faker or Khan.
The risk you run now if you're SKT is you'd be kind of looking at something like a Sejuani, but against a Morgana that can be challenging, and against a Trundle is the big pick that I would be scared of. So the question is, how do they pivot? And right now they're looking at the Vi.
Vi seems to provide the same level 6 power of a Nocturne, but can, as we saw, link up well. Pre-6, I believe Clid had multiple successful ganks before he even got access to the Assault and Battery. And now, with the Vi ripped away, do they fall back to the Sejuani you were mooting for SKT?
Well, Vi went 2-0-9 when Clid played it in the group stage game, and to confirm, Sejuani is now locked in for G2 Esports. Wonder or Caps, who will get this Akali? We're going to find out once G2 lock in their final pick.
The Morgana potential flex as well. Nico, banned of course in the first game of the tournament. Blue side, if I remember correctly, was banned. Going to be locked in here, so there's still a lot of ambiguity.
Yep.
The Nico, a multi-lane flex, but probably not in Perkz' hands this game.
Probably not. Expectations are that Caps and Wonder will be discussing which one takes the Nico and which one takes the Akali. Meanwhile, SKT now trying to round out their draft. Their expectations are that Caps will be in the Akali, and they'll get the Sylas into that matchup, and they're kind of hovering over the Hecarim right now.
So the Hecarim, very unlikely to get a priority matchup, but if you look down this lineup, Hecarim plus the Vi plus the Rakan, there is a huge target on Perkz' back here. Multiple long-range and in some ways targeted engages to make sure Draven ain't catching no access.
My only concern right now for SKT is a Vi ultimate into a Morgana Black Shield can be rather challenging to pull off. But you then look at SKT with their draft. You have the Hecarim ultimate, you have the Vi ultimate, you have the Rakan ultimate.
Baby.
You know, like, and you have Sylas stealing away a Sejuani ultimate. Yes, Morgana Black Shield is good, but in a support position when it won't be that strong, easier to break. You're kind of SKT are like, as you say, Papa Smithy, they're just going to keep stacking CC until one of them lands.
Well, over in the LCK, Khan played the Hecarim twice and is undefeated this year on that power pony. And I think what I like about both of these team compositions is both of them have tools to go forward and end your opponents. So it's up to execution, it's up to early game decision making, and I want to see if G2 can clean up some of the decisions from their early game.
This is going to be a really important game for G2. They want to equalize the series because with SKT coming in with such a convincing game 1, momentum is in their back pocket, and G2 have to try and swing some of that back in their favor.
And the shenanigans are gone for this one. This is much more standard in the draft phase. Hopefully that means we're competitive until the last breath.
Ooh, okay, let's see what can happen now. G2 Esports, very serious looks on their faces. They are down 0-1 in the series after getting destroyed in the opening game. Now Perks on the Draven with the Klepto in the bot lane, 2 teleports on the side of G2, 2 on the side of SK Telecom.
And the very first thing I want to draw our attention to is the Akali rune choices for Caps. The last time he played up against the Sylas, I believe it was against Jensen, and he showcased what he can do on this champion. Or it may have been... I remember he went up against the Sylas. Who played it? I can't quite recall. Point is, he goes for a Liandry's build second, and he grabs himself the Conqueror. His whole goal is to match up against the Sylas on a side lane and out DPS in like a sustained manner.
And zooming out, what I want to draw attention to is the priority, the P word I'll say for this one, because we talked about how SKT had multiple priority lanes. They just kind of whacked G2 in the face with that really allowed that kind of earlier victory over the Sona Taric. This game, SKT doesn't have that level of priority. You love the Nico into the Hecarim. Akali and Sylas actually gone both ways this tournament, but I think both of them have tools, so it'll be intriguing to watch. And outside of, if Zion Rakan can pull off shenanigans level 1, I think Draven and Morgana should have a lot of answers level 2 onwards. So on paper, a lot for Jankos to work with on the G2 side.
Pretty excited to see the Hail of Blades on Teddy as well. Gives you a little bit more laning power because you get those feathers out that bit quicker, and then you can set up for the root much earlier on. So it just makes that early game a little bit better, especially against a Draven who's looking for early priority, as Papa Smithy was saying.
Well, you mentioned Draven. Of course, the man on your screen there is not Perks' Draven. That is Nico. Wonder going up against Khan. This is one of the most anticipated matchups. And Wonder quite famously said in a few interviews that Khan was underperforming. I'll choose my words nicely. Some of the stats you're seeing there is the group stage performance, where you can see Wonder does have it up on CSD, but lower kills plus assists. And surprisingly, Khan gets a lot of jungle proximity attention. While we take a look at that, Mata and Teddy are being forced back. Very good trade in favor of G2.
Even at level 1, this one Teddy loses out on. Brawling across the map as mid lane also getting started. The Vi path always intriguing to see. Clid was super active on Vi in spite of her kind of level 6 reputation. So we'll see if any level 3-4 ganks from Clid can come to fruition.
I'm looking at where Clid could potentially look to gank. Mid lane is an option, but of course, once Caps has the Shroud, that naturally becomes a little bit harder. On top of that, the top lane, while he does have priority, there's not that much setup with the Hecarim, which means that I feel Clid is very much waiting for his level 6 once he's got the ultimate, and then he can be the setup for his laners to then follow up.
Well, we need to see, because there's still a little bit of setup time before any of these teams get involved. We saw Wonder really shoving in early into Khan, as is expected. Khan taking a lot of auto attack damage, needing to deal with those Tangle Bobs and the Blooming Burst. I thought for a second Jankos may fancy his chances against the flashless top laner, but he decided to clear the Scuttle Crab, and it's not making his way top. He'll find Clid in a second.
There's no way for a Hecarim to have priority in this lane. He should only really walk up to either fake a gank or go for a gank with his Ignite, which of course is the trade for something like the Flash or the Ghost. Clid is here anyway. Seeing this actually pulled off successfully, it seems like more of a counter game from Clid.
Love the mini-map ping there from Clid, putting the question mark on top of Raptors and saying, hey, Faker, there's a potential that Jankos is clearing this camp right now, so just be aware of a potential gank.
All right, manages to smite away the big Krug. Busy power charging for Vi, decides to go away. All right, Jankos and Clid going toe-to-toe. No movement from the mid lane yet, and Khan will just about finish this teleport. Actually, no, I think he got interrupted on the recall. Now some trades in the mid lane and trades in the bot lane. It's a fight in multiple fronts. Ignite has already been used by Mata, and there's no further follow-up, but both SKT's top players now under a lot of pressure from Wonder and Jankos. Wonder, 26 CS to 8.
There's no way for Hecarim to interact. He's got about 300 effective range, so easily outranged by the Nico. Gonna take this opportunity for a back with items. The pain starts to lessen, but it's very much a sliding scale for this Hecarim.
And while Wonder and Caps are actually doing very well in their respective lanes, building up pretty decent lane advantages, the bot lane is actually going in favor of Teddy and Mata as Khan forced a flash out from Wonder there.
Yeah, devastating charge deals so much damage. Teleport and Ignite used will get the Summoner spell, so it makes Nico a little bit more gankable the next few minutes. Mickey's gonna flash forward. The Dark Binding didn't connect. Black Shield is doing a lot of work though for Perks. Here comes Jankos. Teddy has already used the flash. Summoner heal still available to him. Gets caught up by the flail and the stun. Here comes the Fault Breaker. Clid jumps in, denting blows to Mickey's face. First blood is available. One more auto. Clid can't close the difference. Now Mata sitting on that flash still. Gotta be very careful, those spinning axes doing work. Jankos gets the shield. Clid and Jankos trade lives 1-for-1.
For once, Clid not on point with the flash and just hopelessly chasing for the auto attack that never comes. They do get a trade kill at the end, but it's overall a trade up for G2.
It was a bit of a comedy of errors from both parts, multiple skill shots being missed there from both sides, and it actually started off with Mickey binding a minion rather than his intended target of Teddy. Following that, we saw the chase begin with Jankos' arrival, the counter gank from Clid, and keep your eyes on Mickey, binds the minion right there, can't quite get over, and a lot of damage comes out in favor of Teddy thanks to that Hail of Blades, but of course, he then uses his flash to try and get that kill onto Perks, and this is where we see this very close exchange.
Meanwhile, Clid, they're trying to defensively move towards him, just awkward looking at that final order that would have killed Mickey. When he does pull away, he understands that the moment Sejuani turns on him, he's going to die because Perks and Mickey are under no more threat. It ends up being a trade kill overall.
All right, as we come back into the game, G2 Esports are now up 1,300 gold. The kill was secured by Mickey, which means Perks on his Draven did not manage to cash in, but he has returned to lane with the BF sword versus Teddy sitting on the pickaxe, and SK Telecom using the back timing to their advantages will manage to pick up this Mountain Drake very early on.
And given those priority lanes for G2, SKT need to find small ways to dissuade this game from being one-sided to G2 around the early game. So something like a Mountain Drake against the flow of the game is a nice pickup for them.
So we see a bit of trading in the mid lane.
Baker's got a Sejuani ultimate, which could be massive, and Clid is waiting in the background. I mean, if you add the Sedge ultimate and Assault and Battery, that is a ton of CC, and it looks like that's what Faker and Clid want to do.
So keep your eyes on teleports. Caps' TP is up and ready to be channeled towards the bot side of the map, but Faker and Clid have managed to sneak in unawares. The pings are coming down.
All right, the ward is just about to spot them. Perks with a very reactive flash. Mickey didn't have one available. Faker forced to use his own. That was a respect flash if ever I've seen one. No teleport channeled from Caps. He's going to extend a small CS lead in the mid lane as the laners move back. Also, by the way, Khan left top lane just in case.
And Khan, we haven't mentioned this, but his all-in actually bought him the ability to walk up to the minion wave before he hit level 6 because he was able to blow the flash coming through from Miko, and now he's level 6 and can actually start to close the CS gap that was insane before.
He has got the Ignite back up and is actually in a pretty decent position. You can see 400 is the only real goal gap, but look, Jankos in the bush.
All right, he's going to find out. Clid get a lot of early damage. And Caps has already left the mid lane. Pop Blossom will not stun Khan. Devastating charge into the wall. Tower was not going to be enough. But here comes Caps. He's going to finish the teleports. And I think Khan will give the kill over to Wonder and gets the Summoner Spell trade advantage with the teleport.
So now we're starting to see this Hecker and Perk work very nicely up against the Nico as we see more trading in the bot lane. But nothing really going to come off the back of it. Beautiful stuff from Khan. Finding that solo kill onto Wonder. Having this way back into the game is a much-needed advantage for SKT early on.
And our general read of the comps is that if both sides are firing shots and being answered during the early game, it bodes well for SKT's big engage come team fights. So G2 really need to pull off a play like this where they're setting up for at minimum turret plates, if not a couple of kills.
Extending that gold lead further, Papa Smithy. It's 2,200 gold before 10 minutes. That plate did fall, and Jankos has yet to leave the bottom quadrant of the map. Now starting the recall, may end up conceding his own blue buff.
Would highly recommend viewers at home just keep your eyes on the minimap and just keep watching the pings, because SKT have such good awareness of where the enemy players are. They're pinging out the Morgana, who's not on vision. They keep a good track of Jankos, so they avoid it. The only time they've been caught up so far is when he actually came through the lane towards the bottom side of the map, and Clid couldn't quite respond in time. So it feels like SKT are just kind of reading G2 very well in these early stages of the game.
All right, Clid is waiting for a potential all-in from Wonder. Wonder's Pop Blossom is 2 seconds away, and Flash as well. Here comes Faker too. Jankos is sitting waiting in wings. Pop Blossom comes on, buys some time. Jankos comes in with the ulti. That's a first, but there's a reply already. Clid gets onto the Assault and Battery. Now Jankos trying to put some damage back. Whirling Death will not find its target as it was angled under the tower. A 1-for-1 trade. But it's SKT that had to move first. Look at the minimap, look at the vision. I think G2 are going to be okay with that.
It's just so addictive to watch the cavalry coming on the minimap. Sometimes I catch myself minimap watching when there's action on the main screen because there was 2 people to outnumber the 3 that was sent by SKT, but the decisiveness only ends up with a trade of 1-for-1. So a lot of tools used, but an overlapping trade.
Yeah, absolutely the case. We can see their caps, by the way, getting a lot of damage onto that mid turret plate, extending the gold lead even further. And I just want to draw your attention to some stats as we press to the 10-minute mark. I'll do it after the replay.
So here we see Wonder landing a really good route onto Khan and utilizing this as an advantage to actually go for the all-in with Jankos right behind him. I don't think he was going to escape because we can see the aftershock actually securing the kill from the side of Clid, and the arrival of Faker meant that he was surely going to die, but in a situation that should have been a 1 versus 3, ends up being a 1-for-1, so G2 can be quite happy with that.
Yeah, I wonder if these lane assignments will stay. I'm keeping my eyes on where Faker's going. The Shroud comes down from Caps.
He could have killed him there, but unfortunately he had no information of where Clid was or where Faker was. So he decided not to go for the commit. We're just happy with those small skirmishes, and we're now back to base.
And actually the health trades, when you have double Conqueror and also the Spirit of Dread from the Hecarim, can actually be pretty supreme with the burst damage that both Akali and Hecarim can do. So we're seeing flexible lane assignments.
Yeah.
They do eventually settle on returning Sylas to the mid.
All right, so Wonder is still up 20 CS. I can see Jankos waiting in the wings. That's a flash forward from Cliff. The Assault and Battery finds his target. Perks has got no flash available. The stopwatch buys so much time, and the 2v3 is being turned around. Feathers will not find a route. Flash away from Teddy. He stays alive and avoids Dark Binding, but look at Faker. He's come down from the river, and this time no one dies.
Beautifully well played from the side of G2. Mickey with a quick responsive flash to get the Black Shield on. Enables Perks to walk away from the charm from Mata, and actually being a heavily favored trade for G2.
All right, good trade. He had to start it with Caps being in Fog of War. He's holding on to perfect execution, but Clid is waiting nearby, and that's a good, advantageous health trade. We catch a glimpse once again in the top lane, and Wonder maintains this 25 CS-ish lead.
And while Caps is known for his brawling, that brawl was as Vi had leashed the Ocean Drake. So there's no Dragon take here from SKT, and actually G2 looking for more.
All right, there's still 2 minutes before these turret plates drop, and G2 want to extend the lead even further. They've got themselves a teleport coming out of SK Telecom. Jankos has already thrown down the ulti, and Khan has arrived to the fight. There goes Caps. Mata is down. Onslaught of Shadows finds nobody. It's a face plant for Khan. Black Shield will prevent some damage, but here comes Faker. He channeled the TP as well. Wonder remains untouched in the top lane, and he's going to push into some plates as well.
First, have to give props to Teddy. In that situation, he focused on clearing the minion wave rather than going for the fight. You saw how difficult it was for G2 to actually set up that dive because they had no wave to play with. So he bought just enough time to almost turn that in SKT's favor.
And that was with SKT using a lot of resources to try to turn it around and getting nothing. So overall ends up with Wonder getting some free time and maybe a turret plate. The Rift Herald goes to the way of SKT, but the only kill to G2.
So keep your eyes on what Teddy does here. He throws out all these feathers, he's going to pull them back in, and unfortunately, he's just, due to the passive nature of how his feathers work, he's just clearing this wave, clearing this wave. Now, Jankos' ult comes through, G2 no longer have a wave to play around, but Captain's like, you know what, I've had enough of this, I need a kill, and they're looking for more.
Oh, they are indeed. G2 Esports have got a number of plates already with less than a minute to go. It's a 3,000 gold lead, almost the inverse of the previous game. Now, SK Telecom are being pressured as the Dragon is going to be focused. The Jankos ultimate not available. And this tower, I think, a huge props to Teddy and to Mata, who have been holding on to this bottom lane. They will catch up Mata, but he's going to be able to get over the wall. And as he dances away from the battle, G2, they've got some pressure in the bot lane, but it's against a Rift Herald, which is picked up by SKT.
Early Merc treads for Mata enables him to get out of that binding and walk away to safety. Good early purchase in what could be a very difficult matchup.
And I also believe that G2 are playing to the clock a little bit because that Rift Herald won't be channeled in an advantageous spot pre-14 minutes. They're going for a return gank bot side, get some access to the Drake if they want to fall back to it, but it means the Rift Herald charge is going to have to be more strategic rather than just slamming it down for the guaranteed goal.
Also, G2 have the advantage that both their teleports are up while SKT don't. So playing around bot side means it's way easier for their solo laners to get involved and actually snowball things even further towards G2.
And as we take stock of the situation, a very brief pause, I'll find out the reason for you. This feels good for the series and as an EU caster to see G2 work on some of the big mistakes. I was very nervous after game one. They've come in, they've taken advantage of the strong sides of their map, and they are punishing SK Telecom, but they need to transition into this mid game where they have shown some great strengths.
And we were speaking off air about what this sort of a loss in game number 1 would actually impact G2. And they have that veterancy now, so that's one thing in their corner. But also the manner of the defeat with the kind of surprising Sonataric opening into that kind of very quickly going sideways. To me, it feels like a very easy game for a mentally resilient player just to scout and say, okay, that one was a little bit creative from us, didn't work out. We tried to freeze some minion waves. Let's just reset for game number 2. And now the team with the onus on them to play early and to get advantages have those advantages. SKT have made some decent counterpunches. And my only takeaway at 14 minutes is that we're set up for a really exciting finish to game number 2.
And what I get excited about is we approach the part in the game where G2 have actually made a lot of mistakes towards the second half of the group. We actually have a quick replay of the fight that we saw earlier. So we drew a lot of attention towards Teddy initially, but I want to draw your attention to Jankos and Caps this time around. They actually come in from the flank and notice that Wonder chooses not to teleport in, even though the engage lands again. There's no minion wave for them to play around. Caps realizes he can go for the flash execute, and he actually wants to make it 2 and thinks, you know what, if I trade 1 for 2 here, this is actually super worth. But then he realizes, oh, I can actually get out of this situation. I can get the TP out from Faker and overall come out ahead.
And the stopwatch is actually necessary from Teddy. Otherwise, the AoE on that perfect execution could have been a casual double kill on that ability. So needed to use a lot of resources, SKT, and of course, after that replay, no counter kill despite a bit of chase and TP's used.
And this ultimately resulted in G2, as you said, quick shot, sitting on about a 3,000 gold lead right now, and we kind of transition into that mid game where for G2, while they were praised coming into the tournament as this being one of their strongest points, in the second half of the groups, this was actually one of their weakest. When they lost to Fongfu Buffalo, it's because they drafted 1-3-1 and they kept team fighting. When they played up against Team Liquid, they kept getting bought into this idea of we need to play more of IG's style. So now, coming into today, the question was, will they clean up their ability to play the mid game, and can they do it against a team like SKT?
Well, game 1 mid game was cleaner than the early game. Let's see what happens in game 2. Just to give you guys an update, the players on stage have reported lag, and league officials are busy investigating the claims. I will give you an update with more information as and when I receive it. I want to throw some numbers at you very quickly, because something that I was trying to set up and trying to work towards was how SK Telecom advanced from the stages of the group. The first half of the group, kind of figuring things out, figuring out the tempo of everyone else. Papa Smithy, you very, very convinced that SKT were going to ramp up, scale, and in your mind would adapt to this meta to overcome it. And we're seeing that kind of 2 shades of SKT. The group, the game 1 game felt like round 2, and now we're going to find out what round this game falls into.
And I think, to me, it echoes round 1, because there is a lot of lack of priority here. Scaling is another way to look at it. They don't always intersect, but you can see a late game future for SKT that means that Draven will be trivialized by one of the engaged tools they've drafted multiple of. However, the early game was sacrificed. They've made some counterpunches they haven't rolled over, and I would say that in that first series, when Faker was on more of the Azir champion, the stay mid lane champion that can't brawl as hard around the river or topside, that really played into G2's hands. Now we're on more of a brawling champion who's been able to equalize kind of the overall map pressure. But still, the flare point hasn't come yet. There's a turning point in this game, I would wager, in the next 5 to 6 minutes before Baron spawns, that really sets one team on what feels like a winning trajectory, but we're only seeing the rising action. It hasn't peaked just yet.
And this is what I found fascinating about both these teams, right? Because whenever we've talked about SKT as a team, throughout their history, it's always been, they always get better. They just grow and grow. They're always hungry to improve upon even the smallest of mistakes. And that's why internationally, they were such a massive success for so long. And then you compare that to G2, and many fans look at them and go, well, domestically, they would kind of like win lane and win game, right? And then they got into their finals, and then they absolutely smashed, and people never really got to see this team like develop or grow because it was never needed, right? But when you speak to Grabs and when you speak to the players, their expectations are, actually, we suck in the best of 1 format. We're a team that actually grows. We're actually a team that gets better because we identify our mistakes so quickly that we can rectify them and fix them coming into game 2. And I feel like SKT is the first team that is truly pushing G2 to the limit that they might need to demonstrate.
Well, listen, it's the first time they've lost a game in a best of 5 with this roster. They 3-0'd Origin twice. Round 2, and then in the finals for LEC. And obviously coming into this best of 5, game 1 did not go well. However, we have seen the bounce back. We have seen a significant gold lead, 3,500 gold as we're approaching 15 minutes. And for G2 Esports, that's a good sign. Just to give you guys an update, our technicians are working on it, and I don't have an exact time, so I don't want to make promises, but they are looking at the problem, and we'll get back to the game as soon as it is resolved.
And the growth for SKT Point as an organization definitely stands true. We remember this in 2015, 2016, and onwards in 2017, but it didn't necessarily have to map one-to-one to this roster that doesn't have that effective core. When you saw SKT, it was always Faker, Bang, Wolf, Coma.
Yeah.
And while Coma is still around the org, he's not involved on stage, he's not as involved in the pick bans. Zephyr, previously of a Freak of Freaks, is now their drafting coach, so it's only Faker now. So there was no kind of requirement for them to fit into this organizational narrative, and yet it was on display throughout the course of LCK Spring. SKT reinvented themselves multiple times, settled in the playoffs against Kingzone and also Griffin as that more reactive team. They started reactive. They quickly threw out that playbook and got more aggressive. Where does it all lead? Who knows?
Well, it leads to Vi, Hecarim, and Rakan jumping into G2 Esports, and we are back on the Rift, ladies and gentlemen. As we're approaching the 15-minute mark, you can see the 4 turret plates have already been secured by G2 Esports. They're pushing in the bottom lane, and look at SK Telecom all in the top lane.
So this is something you were talking about before, Papa Smithy. From the side of G2, they were focusing all their resources towards the bot side of the map. They had the double teleport. It was very easy for them to play around this lane. And now, with the Rift Herald, they know they want to try and utilize it early. So they're going to try and trade towers as Jankos gets collapsed on.
All right, Jankos is in a little bit of trouble. He's already flashed. Caps waiting in the wings as Faker was caught out by the Sedge ultimate. Tower falls in the bottom lane. That's the first. That's a 4,000 gold lead temporarily. SK Telecom may continue this siege as there's a trade in the mid lane. Faker and Caps now going toe-to-toe. Here comes Khan. Onslaught of Shadows is available, and Jankos does not have the prison. Dark Binding goes wide, and Whirling Death comes out as well. G2 Esports have the numbers to fend off the pressure, and now G2 are grouping in the mid lane.
Moving around the map for SKT got them out of the scenario where they were being repeat dive. That's why they changed their battle lines and go topside to use what they have to guarantee the advantage of the Rift Herald, and also to try to contest the defensive position where G2 just hadn't spent a lot of time around that top blue side. So I think overall, going even in trades when we, again, outline the eventual future of the team fights is pretty smart from SKT, but G2 can reset here and regroup easily.
Yeah, I agree. I think SKT, they made the smart decision here. It's the best scenario for them to not fall too far behind. Now, the game that I like to play with every Draven game is how many stacks does the Draven have? He's currently sitting at about 415 to 420. Right? He is sitting on so much potential gold that he has not quite secured yet. And that could be the moment that you were talking about, Papa Smithy, that one defining point in the next couple of minutes that could swing this game in either direction.
And that's kind of the moment that I look to give confidence that this 3,000 gold lead can accelerate further. You cannot deny the pick or the team fight power that SK Telecom have available to them. Ocean Drake will be up in about 2.5, maybe 3 minutes. Baron a little bit after that, but both teams pretty content just pushing out these waves, and nobody's really pushing deep into enemy territory.
What I can deny about SKT is their item timings are still future. We don't have a Trinity Force. We don't have any item on Faker. It's 2 building blocks of his core items. Essence Reaver is there, but everyone else is still on the precipice of the items you need to really make that oomph work when you dive after the Draven. So for now, SKT, who have in the past, very recently, been very good at choosing their times, still need to weather the storm a little bit longer.
All right, looking at the mini-map, Caps is picking a fight with Khan, while the rest of SKT are trying to defend mid lane. I correct this, SKT are killing Caps. He simply bit off more than he could chew and got collapsed.
Now, the goal here for Caps, what I imagine, is that he saw that they had pressure in mid lane, so he assumed that they could push bot. And if 3 members show up bot, then maybe he can trade it for a tower in mid. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case because G2 lost their minion wave, which means that he was ultimately overextended in the bot lane, and it was an easy kill picked up from the side of SKT.
And that engage range that will work against Draven in a teamfight coming out of Fog of War is also going to be very, very strong. So he's able to get that pick there. Facing onto Teddy, doesn't get bound. Only just.
Yeah, not this time around, and of course Perks was fancying the kill, so didn't get too many autos onto the tower. 3-man stack of SK Telecom pushing on the bottom tower. And of course the rest of G2 were in the mid lane. As the pause comes in, and of course we saw that gold difference. You know, it was plus 5,000 in favor of SKT in game 1, plus 5,700 in fact, and around plus 1,003 and a bit in favor of G2. But they are playing the pressure game. And G2, SKT have some good answers.
But this immediate game state, where on the Rift they'll soon have an Akali with Gunblade, a Draven with Bloodthirst, a Boots 2, and another BF sword, compared to, as we were noting, the constituent parts of big items, actually suits G2 to never let up pressure, because you don't actually want SKT to shop. Yes, on their next shop they'll be stronger, but if you force them into a bad shop timing, then suddenly you get ward supremacy about something. Maybe you get an objective somewhere on the map. They are very much behooved for now to make this current game state last as long as they can.
Yeah, and I actually wonder, I kind of look at the scaling for both sides, and like both Xayah and Draven scale pretty well, but of course Draven always has that advantage of the empowered auto attacks that he does get from his spinning axes. You then kind of compare and contrast the Akali versus the Sylas, who offers more value in a team fight. Surely it comes down to execution, because it's about which ultimates can you steal? Can you land your skill shots? Can you dive onto the backline? And then Neeko versus Hecarim. Sure, Hecarim offers a lot more utility, but does the Neeko not offer more damage? And so like the scaling is like very interesting to see how things back and forth, and like how, if we see any team fights at all throughout the rest of this game.
Now, the issue with the Neeko is it's the most recent school of thought we saw in our last series yesterday when we saw the on-hit Neeko. It is on-hit Neeko here, and of course, a team fight was won by the 3-4-man strangle that was put out there, the long CC that was created. However, that was with a Sivir who had hit the item timings, who had a lot of AoE. In this case, recreating that scenario that basically won TL, the ultra late game team fight, for this on-hit Neeko. I feel like this Neeko very much going to be about the side lane and not the team fight.
I agree.
I just can't wait for it to happen, because the team fights are going to be mental.
Yep.
There are so many tools on both sides, and we have such highly skilled individual players, you know, piloting these champions, that one skill shot can literally make or break the entirety of this game. And then when you start compounding that with those huge AoE ultimates, like Pop Blossom versus Onslaught of Shadows, one of them, well-timed, can completely obliterate the enemy team.
The only small point I'll say for people at home is if the fight is on G2's initiation, I think that's where they have the best chance of success, because if you look at the reverse, if 3 people are diving at Draven, someone's going to get there. However, the Xayah, if you can blow her Featherstorm very early, will be accountable. So the Featherstorm here, compared to the Black Shield, it's a selfish timing versus a team timing, and that can actually cause a lot more headaches. So I think G2 have to make the first move on that initiation chicken.
Oh man, the tension just continues to build here as G2 Esports and SK Telecom find themselves in a pause. Thank you for joining us. SKT are up 1-0 in the series. So we can see the technicians on stage busy investigating.
I see a throne, and I wonder what Faker would look like sitting in said throne. He sat on many nice chairs, the Bonjwa chair in the past, so can't help but think about that one. But a lot of business to be done before that could happen.
And it would be a return to form, of course. One of the stories that starts to get proven or disproven by this event is LCK and Korea, and more importantly, Faker's strength. Now, this is just a replay where Caps figured he'd pick that 1v1 because the rest of G2 had pressure mid.
So, yeah.
There's a lot here.
I don't agree with the play from Caps. Like, in a 1v1, I definitely can see Caps with an advantage on the Akali, but I ultimately think that he didn't have enough vision nor enough priority anywhere else on the map to try and force it, and I think that it was good side from the SKT to ultimately punish it.
I think our video editors are sending a subtle message there. Caps dying overlaid on the throne. I don't know if I'm
what does it mean, Trevor?
If I'm reading too much into that or not, but hey, I gotta theorize.
Small interaction to theorize also is that both Vi and Hecarim have like a little knockbacks that interact with the Shroud.
That's true.
So that's that little bit of synergy. That's always very situational, but also the Vault Breaker can hit during the Shroud, as we saw in previous plays. So just feels like Akali's been a little bit more nailed down than previously, because Akali has been kind of one of the supreme flexers. We've seen the big 5. Akali's kind of 1 or 2.
So we, it's quite fascinating because we talked a little bit about SKT's ability, SKT's story, rather, and about how Faker's returned to the throne, about international success. Whereas for G2, they're actually on the precipice of making League of Legends international history, where we could potentially have the first ever EU versus North American final. They could be the
Rift
first,
rivals?
for a long time, they could finally get their revenge against SKT from 2017, when they met SKT before. And like, there's a lot on the line for this organization as well, if they're able to topple these titles.
I mean, also, if you do think about 2017 MSI finals, 2018 World Championship finals, potentially 2019 finals, if G2 can do it, but it's a long way ahead. Give us a few minutes. We are going to head it over to Dash to explain a little bit more what's going on.
Thank you very much. Quick shot. League officials believe they have identified the game server itself to be the cause of the lag that the players are feeling on stage. So as we have a moment to break down this second game of the best of 5, they will be working to chrono break this game onto a secondary server. So while that happens, I turn to you because for G2, a much different look from game 1, finding themselves 4 to 5K gold up at this point where they were 5K gold down in the previous game.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say the comp we saw in game 1 with the way they played it was as successful as the current server. So it's important to move on to
too soon!
different server.
Too soon!
Too soon, he just said it.
I do like it though.
Cut his mic.
But it works.
And especially the top lane matchup that we've been seeing. Wonder on this Nico got a huge advantage that, you know, a lot of resources had to be put into rectify.
You see what I have to work with?
Clearly great comedians.
Oh, yeah. There's never a lack of content when it comes to you all. Sorry, Kobe, to just jump in on your point. But let's continue down the side. I mean, totally different looks for both squads. We got the Sonateric out. We have some more. We've got that very aggressive Vi pick for Clid, which he found success with in the group stage. Does have a few kills up to this point.
And I do kind of want to talk about the draft before we start really getting into like the meat of this game. I really like SKT's run at kind of like their options of how they're going to answer G2 in draft. I agree with the sentiment that I feel like G2 are the much more flexible team in the draft, just their creativity in general. But you were talking about this, I believe, last night on Cooldown. You know, if G2 go back to their, I know I was going to credit you, the 1-3-1 playstyle, you have to draft hard engage. So things like having the Vi, having the Rakan, even if you get a good flanking position with the Hecarim, I think SKT are recognizing that G2 want to play to those side lanes and making sure that they have a full arsenal to deal with it. But that's why Morgana is so important. And if G2 win this game, I think suddenly you're going to start to see this tournament meta really revolve around getting that Morgana and that Tahm Kench away from them, because these are two big picks that can make sure that they have 1-3-1 access.
Yeah, I mean, definitely agree on Morgana being super important. I think Draven is also very good against things like Rakan. He dashes at you, you can knock him out of the dash, and you can basically kill him in 2 shots in the late game, right? So there's a lot of good answers I actually feel for G2 late game when it comes to killing the engage. Because also we know that, you know, a Vi and a Hecarim, they will not get that tanky compared, or they'll not get tanky enough for Draven to be in a situation where you can't actually kill them. Got it, we got it out there.
Yeah, we got there.
They'll be tankier than the Rakan.
Yes, that's it. Not tanky enough, however. I want to talk about the Akali pick, which I actually think will be the MVP pick. I need Caps to obviously not run to a side lane when he has no prio anywhere and just die to the Hecarim and Vi, because that's not needed. But I think late game, they can't kill him. And then he will eventually just take down the entire enemy team.
Definitely a high priority pick for Caps throughout the tournament. Again, at the top of the day, we were talking about flex picks. I know we focused in on Ryze and Pyke, but for these two squads, I think more so than, say, Team Liquid yesterday in their series, these flex picks will be more relevant to this best of 5 overall.
I want Kobe to talk about Vi, though. Why is Vi good in the comp?
Vi is
James
great.
leans forward.
Frostgarden touched on it, right? It's the hard engage, and it is the point and click hard engage. If G2 are going to try and split the map, right? They should continue to try and split, keep the pressure up on multiple points. Then that multiple forms of engage with Hecarim and Vi, both of them are unstoppable engages. That is your goal. I'm not saying that is an easy task against a Black Shield and an Akali and a Nico, but that is the point.
I agree.
Big agree. Thank you very much, Deficio. Receiving word that we have about 10 to 15 more minutes probably before we end up back in game. So just to let you at home know, the players will be allowed to leave the stage, return to their ready rooms, and have any necessary discussions there. So maybe perhaps that's where I'd like to go next, which is, you know, oftentimes you don't get 10 to 15 minutes to discuss the current game state and where you want to go from there. And that's an interesting way to look at where this game is at.
And I would take G2's perspective, and where they want to go is get this cash in for Draven. I don't think we checked in on exactly how many adoration stacks he had, but he's been stacking pretty much the entire game.
He was about 1,000 gold up.
He's 1,000 gold up with some number of adoration stacks ready to be cashed in, which could make it even more astronomical.
And he has a full BT now. He has a BF as well. It's going to turn into an IH when he gets a kill eventually.
So yeah, I think it's 100% about looking to play around this Draven, set up, even if you have to sacrifice a member to get him that kill, it is worth so much more.
And I think there's actually a high chance G2 will opt into just team fighting because of all the hard engage on the side of SKT. We already saw the Vi and Hecarim, again, as I mentioned before, go to the side lane, one-shot Akali because Caps was overextending. And if you want to get that kill on Draven, the fact that if you actually do get just slight push inside and then you can group in around Draven near a dragon or something, is a good way to start a fight where you can literally just one-shot someone like Mata. Like, he's free gold when he jumps in towards that Draven.
It diversifies what they're able to like play out the game with. If the Draven does have Infinity Edge and BF Sword, if he cashes it in, suddenly you can 100% just group up as 5 and just rock into a team fight because you feel so powerful.
Yeah, or even just a couple, right? What Draven and Morgana looks like late game against Rakan, Draven can just stand there. Black Shield is on, and Rakan actually does nothing. You get maybe 2 axes there if you crit, and that's your cash in.
And boom, yeah, there he goes. So for the side of SKT then, with this in mind, the idea that Rakan doesn't have the freedom to engage at his will, where do they find their out, essentially, in this game?
I mean, right now it feels like the only lane where there is kill pressure is the Hecarim one, where they can go towards actually no matter who he's facing in sides. The problem is if he's against Akali and she gets to Shroud early and she's actually not completely overextending, there's a great chance G2 can move down and react in time and actually then counter play the move. But I think there's an opening. And I think also when you run these super hard engage comps, there's always a chance in fights in the initial engage, when the setup is still kind of being planned out and being done, and everyone is not standing already 100% in position. Quick Rakan engages, quick ultis from a Hecarim can always catch people out. So there's kill pressure, especially on backline, if G2 are not sitting with the Draven in perfect position and Black Shield ready. I just think most of the fights, Draven should be there to carry for G2.
We'll take a look at probably the best look SKT had in that sense of Hecarim, Vi working together to zero out Akali in the side lane. But as you mentioned, Officio, the difficulty of that, if Akali has the awareness of the setup, right, it becomes that much greater. This is
and
about
awareness
everything.
of the map.
Yeah, this is everything going as well as it could here for SKT.
Like, look at the minimap. So Wonder is no TP and is not even pushing his lane, or he's trying to push his lane now. So Caps has zero reason to do this. He's just like super greedy. It's like very typical Caps kind of play. And this gives actually a very easy kill over to SKT that can try and go for again and again and get Hecarim and Vi into an even stronger state where they can like one-shot someone when they dive in. Because the damage will deal even if they don't land the CC.
And it's kind of like these windows that, as a newly made G2 fan watching these games, that I'm getting kind of nervous because I really do like the look of both G2's compositions, despite the 25-minute slam that happened in game number 1. It's just some of these smaller decisions that are scaring me a little bit, where I'm like, oh no, this isn't the cleanest, crispest gameplay. And at some point you got to be like, okay, this is our champion coming from Europe. You just have to take the good with the bad, and some of that is kind of these more aggressive plays. But against SKT, it's very terrifying.
All right, well, we both know that Vi and Hecarim require a lot of golden items to really pop off. SKT looking to make that happen while G2 extend their lead and want to close out Game 2 in their favor. The team is working on the chrono break. We're going to take a quick break. Meet us back here after the commercial for the rest of Game 2.
You ready?
A quick look at some of the newest skins to hit the Rift as we sit in a small pause here in the middle of Game 2. G2, big contrast from Game 1 to Game 2. Behind the play almost every step of the way in Game 1 and suffering a massive gold disadvantage or deficit. Here now sits with a healthy gold lead and look to close out a win against SKT.
And something that I always want to look for from like game 1 to game 2 is the agency that G2's players get to make plays and how they play lane phases. And that doesn't always translate as like having a kill lane or anything like that. But, you know, the likes of Caps on Akali, how much he's able to do with that champion versus something like Morgana. The likes of Draven and Morgana versus the Sona Taric in the lane phase, because it feels like their playstyle almost doesn't really change a lot of time. Constantly, Mickey was stepping forward, very aggressive with that Taric instead of just farming the lane out. So I like to see champions that can be more proactive in these moments.
I also think it's cool to see over 4 games now, if we count this one as a full game, right, as a game 4. We've had 3 games without Sona Taric. And in those games, whenever there's been skirmishes and team fights, they've actually been fairly even, maybe even slightly G2 favored. You know, they won the 2 games in groups. The second game they won was the Pyke game, where they fell slightly behind, but then started winning some of these big fights, and Pyke got fed, and they got back into the game. So we're very clearly seeing that individually, we're not in the situation we've been in maybe a couple of years ago when G2 would face SKT, and we just had with this feeling whenever it went to a team fight, SKT would just like out-muscle them completely. It's not happened here at MSI when they play each other, other than, of course, the Sona Taric game when they're behind like 10K gold.
Yeah, and now that they do have this big lead, I want to see how G2 are actually going to end out this game. Because this is very important for the best of 5.
The Draven will get a kill and he will one-shot turrets.
But doesn't it say something, the fact that we've seen G2 have such incredible games against SKT in groups, and you were still like, but can they close it out? Because there's always just this giant looming SKT brand that everyone just like must bow down to.
But I think what's interesting too is I just received a bit of information I'm sure some people will just enjoy. A behind the scenes look we don't normally get to see is that while I did mention the players were removed from the stage and allowed to go back to their ready rooms, they have not been allowed to reconvene with their coaches or strategic staff. And so still isolating the players and their voices here to kind of preserve, you know, the integrity of how they believe they should play out the game. And so again, I kind of return to that question of, you know, from this game state, it rests on those 5 players to identify how they end up winning it.
I'm really glad to hear that, because oftentimes one of the interesting discussions that comes up, and people always ask us on Twitter, and fans are like, what if in competitive games, if you had the coach on headset for the whole game? And my answer is always, like, that completely changes League of Legends. So much of the game is in decision-making and deciding in-game amongst your team how your strategy is going to unfold for ending out games like this. So keeping the coaches separate, I think, is critical.
Right, and deciding with imperfect information, right? Again, I think it's an interesting contrast even just between the position we find ourselves in as analysts and viewers to what the players themselves are working with.
And you can kind of see this, especially in the LEC. There are certain teams that we call like playbook teams, where they have their set win conditions and nothing deviates from that. And they'll run the same play every single time. I think Splice really comes to mind, where they're great at setup, but they're not great at finding these creative plays on the fly. G2 are excellent at kind of problem solving and figuring out the Rubik's Cube in a game of, this is the different information that's coming in. What do we now do with this information to change our game plan? And that's kind of one of these key differences in when you have these players like Caps on the Rift that can help lead these charges.
And I can say this is actually one of my favorite things about working with the team. It's go into a scrim, sit behind the players, be completely useless, obviously, but just sit there and just watch
As usual for you.
Yeah, exactly. Watch how they're communicating, tapping around what's happening, and then also just executing these, different combos that you have to do as a professional player against another professional player. And it's so crazy to put yourself in that situation when you were just watching from the outside of like, oh, why didn't they do this? Why didn't they go here? Well, they had to decide this while they were also busy doing this thing because they had to fight this guy or be ready for something else happening. Also, by the way, he didn't have info of this thing that we have because we're seeing from up here. And I absolutely love it. Like, I love just sitting there, just being like, yes, keep going, this is great.
No, I actually totally understand that, because for the 6 months before I moved into the host position, I was a ref on the LCS.
So you got to do
I had the privilege of standing behind all of these pros in an actual game moment and listen to their comms live about how they would problem solve, break down, this is the information we have, therefore this is the decision we're going to make. And and just as easily, I could then go look at, the stream and go, oh, had they known this bit of information, they probably would not have made that decision. But it highlighted for me, the intensity of the moment, the imperfectness of a game of League of Legends, and really narrowed in on this split-second decision-making. It really is reduced to that amount of time.
But also, what is a right and wrong decision in a game where there is no clear rule for how you have to play it? Like, in the moment, you feel my champion will deal more damage than his champion. So in the moment, you're like, okay, as long as I do all these things correctly, I will kill this person.
I will win it, yeah.
And on the other side, it's like, I don't know, as long as I do this and just avoid this, I will kill him. So I can take this 1v1. And they both say it, and they both go for it. Someone will die, and then it's very quick to go, ooh, he died.
Yeah.
Terrible. What a bad play, Even though technically it was a good call to do it, but there was a small little detail that went in favor of the other one.
I think even at this tournament, there was a super interesting interview with Caps after, I believe, the second time that they beat, or the first time that they beat Team Liquid, and he beat Jensen in the reverse matchup. He was like, there's all these things that you can change, even within the matchup of champions, to be able to come out ahead. And the basic rule of thumb, fight when you are strong and they are not strong.
Great.
Wow!
There it is.
That makes a lot of sense.
The crux of League of Legends. But if I try and bring this back and apply it to this series here, I think one thing that continually pops up in my brain is the way that many of the players at this tournament have talked about SKT as an organization and a team, in that they are so great at minimizing mistakes, right? And so eliminating those opportunities in the split second for something to go wrong, safeguarding themselves against everything that can go wrong. So the real question is, for G2, can you either exploit that or can you force them to make more mistakes than they normally would?
I think the thing is again, it's changing the rule book. You have such a massive experience between Faker and Mata, and I did have questions about, what was Khan's international appearance or international state going to be like again, because it feels like he keeps coming up to these big stages and it's not quite the calm that you want to see. What is Clid going to look like internationally? Like, this is his first big appearance on a stage. He could just completely choke and fall off, but the fact that you have an MVP performance from, your brand new jungler, that Khan is having a solid tournament, and then Mata and Faker, you have them as like your ground, it feels like everything really came together for SKT, and they're continuing to develop. In terms of how do you break that fortitude, that's why it always feels like it's going to go to Game 5 if you beat SKT. I would be shocked if you would be ever able to beat SKT before then, just because of that collective experience to reset after hard games, to ground it. And I mean, I guess I say that after Samsung like 3-0'd SKT when they finally did fall, but...
We all forgot about that.
Yeah.
We only think about last year's Worlds.
A bit more info on the chrono break itself. Typically when these happened, the game is brought back to a dead ball state, typically because it is used in response to a bug occurring. As this was not the result of a bug itself, we will be returning the game to the exact moment in which it was paused, which is 17:54 game time. So again, just an interesting piece of information to consider when these players are coming right back into the precise moment that they were already in, not having, maybe 5 to 10 seconds of lead time with some understanding of what was going to transpire on the map.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a lot of the players that have had to sit through situations like this. And one of the biggest things is remembering all the information that you're holding in your head at that time. Because there's so much information that you hold in your head while you're playing a game, keeping track of every member of the enemy team on the minimap, cooldowns of flashes and stuff like that. So sometimes you'll see a team come out with a play immediately out of the pause, and you're like, that is extremely impressive to actually remember exactly what was happening.
Right, but Kobe, don't they just have to remember if they are strong and they are weak?
Yes.
That shouldn't be that hard to remember.
League of Legends is so simple.
Then we fight them, right?
It's so simple. So simple. The Vi pick here, I do want to come back to this.
Of course you go back to Vi.
Of course I want to go back to it. If I have nothing else to talk about, I will talk about Vi.
James is a Vi main.
Very much so. I think it is interesting to see Clid go for this. Obviously, they found success with it in the group stages, but he is still the only player, remaining in the tournament here in the knockouts that even reached, for this pick in general. And so I'm wondering, in a sense, why it is that SKT sees value in the pick, one, And then 2, enough value in the pick where other teams don't, that they are willing to pick it here and believe that it can be the difference maker.
Can I tag on another question?
Yeah.
And I really want to direct this towards Kobe, our jungle expert. Do you think Vi has decent early game jungle matchups against the likes of like the Jarvans and the Rek'Sais that have dominated this tournament? Or do you think that once they're taken off, that's when you start to see Vi like creeping back up?
Yeah, it definitely, the Jarvan and the Rek'Sai are definitely going to have some extra advantage. Sejuani is a great matchup because Vi actually scales really well into the game, and Vi is also very good in skirmishes. Her ultimate is, while it does have AoE knockback for pass-through, the single target lockdown is so good against a team like G2 for me. So against this team, stylistically, I really like it. The Morgana is one of the hardest champions to play a Vi into.
Oh, God, that's my nightmare.
And who breaks the Black Shield instantly?
That's the problem, right?
That's a good point, right?
Yeah,
You don't have
that's
much.
physical, most of it, and then Rakan, obviously, will never break it.
But yeah, to answer your point, Vi is one of the best scaling junglers, and if you look at some of the statistics, we've actually gone over in solo queue. She has one of the highest scaling win rates, actually the highest currently in solo queue right now. As the game goes on for junglers.
You can see the players making their way back to the stage just now, which means we are narrowing in towards a resume on this game. Caps' dad, always there out in the crowd to show his
so
support for the
lovely.
G2 Army.
He's actually the nicest
He's
person.
so
ever.
nice.
He's like at almost every single show as well, and he's like such a friendly guy to like every single team.
Apple doesn't fall far from the tree there. One of the smiliest parents and one of the
My
smiliest
mom met him
players
as
there.
well.
in Caps.
She absolutely loves him because they were both down there.
Deficio's mom approved.
Yeah, they were down there watching their sons. I'm taking my mom sitting next to me because I wasn't playing right, but
Mm-hmm.
Caps was achieving great things as a player, and I was
Right.
just kind of there.
I'm so ready for this sitcom. Just like
You
my
know?
parents.
But then we actually beat G2 at the time when my mom was there, and then she met Cap's
Deficio,
dad
come on,
after.
you gotta stop hanging on.
my mom
One
won.
time you beat G2.
The one window. And he's like, yeah, my mom was
won.
there.
I
I gotta find a
We
way to
beat G2
insert
that
this.
week.
Did you know that one time we beat G2?
We did beat G2 when they were undefeated.
Please tell me she did not show up for any of playoffs.
She did not show up for any of playoffs. When she showed up, we won.
Okay, yeah, fair
So-
enough. Oh my goodness. It is a lengthy pause. Of course, we have talked about this in the past for players. Not only is it about holding on to the game state and the important information and strategically what you're going to do next, there is also the wear and tear of endurance here, of just being high energy, being on in the moment that these players are going to have to deal with many more games on the horizon.
I actually wanted to flip back to this idea of, because we were just talking about the Origin 06.
I thought it was my mom.
Oh, no, no. Lovely woman.
Let's talk more about Deficio losing.
No, but the idea of, on the back half of the LEC split, G2 were dropping all of these games. There were question marks heading onto them into the playoffs, is this actual weakness? And we kind of saw the exact same mirror here in the group stage where they start out very strong, they're super dominant, and then it starts to teeter off. But then it feels like I was given this hope that because of G2's form, when we did finally see them in the LEC gauntlet, of going the same kind of hope heading into this best of 5. And so I just have this gut feeling that despite the fact that it went from kind of crazy creative picks of the Sonateric to now a more standard game with a Draven Morgana, that there's probably some spicy meatballs that are still left over for G2 to pull out in this best of 5, because that's like the tape that I have of when they were last kind of in this situation of this big break where they were falling off. You can say there's these weaknesses, we figured them out. They always throw a curve.
I mean, very typical of a best of 5, right? You kind of want to wait until you're forced to show your hand in some sense around what else you have left in the tank. Because, hey, if you can skate through your semifinal without showing that stuff, you're that much more or better positioned for your next series against TL.
Sure, it's also very important to highlight that G2 are not the kind of team to pick something weird just to do it.
Right.
Like, they are actually waiting for certain picks from the other team in these drafts before they lock it in. Like, the Pyke was very clearly there against the Jace when that got locked in. And who knows, maybe Jace got locked in game 1 against them. They were done Pyke already there. But they're not a cheese team by any means. They just have a lot of freedom. And that's kind of thing that's great about G2 is discipline is not necessarily the thing that's valued the highest compared to creativity and, let's say, a bit more freedom and looseness in the way you're approaching the game. Which also means sometimes there will be games where we just sit there and go, why are you guys all doing this? Like, this is so weird. But that's what you get with this kind of style. You get some great things from time to time, but you will also get inconsistencies. Same like IG.
Well, circumstance means everything for these teams, and the circumstance right now is that G2 finds themselves well ahead of SKT in Game 2. The game is almost ready to go, so we're going to head back to the casters to get us prepped.
Thank you very much, Dash, and the rest of the analysts. As a quick update, as you mentioned, the game is almost ready. We'll be loading back in at 17 minutes and 54 seconds, where G2 Esports is in the lead. We've already talked about how the league officials kept the 5 players away from their coaches and analysts to protect the integrity of the game. Something else that we've just learned is as the players are on stage, they will be allowed to watch the last 30 seconds of gameplay that led up to the pause, refresh their memories, allow them to come back into this game with a little bit more context, and we can continue playing from roughly 18 minutes.
And I think that's just experience from all the previous times that we've had similar issues kind of blending in. Like Kobe was mentioning, the potential to get frazzled and miss out on those things like cooldowns and all the things you'd be tracking in and of the moment. So it should mean that when the game gets going, you don't have to go for any truce backs. You can recreate the decisions you wanted to make at that moment.
And that's what I really, really like about this additional insight into the problem-solving side of live games. Now, let's turn our attention back to the game. As I've already mentioned, G2 Esports up roughly 4,000 gold. Once we get back in, they've had a pretty strong early game. They've been pretty proactive. And barring 1 or 2 small mistakes, it is a good turnaround from game 1 to game 2, Vedius.
And I think that the next steps for G2 will be very much about splitting up the map, trying to play that 1-3-1. They have strong sides with the Nico and the Akali, and for the side of SKT, they're still waiting for those crucial item spikes that you were talking about before, Papa Sven.
That's right, Trinity Force still not purchased, a lot of gold ready to be spent, and we should never lose track of the fact that Perks is also on the precipice of a huge cash-in. That snowball of an item, it just feels like the next, or I should say the first time we see a true engagement. The winner of that is very well set up to take the game.
So we are finally back into game, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see, very close across the board, 5-4 in kills. The most recent kill was picked up in the bot lane, catching Caps out of position. A lot of teleports and summoner spells are up and ready to go. So it's only a matter of time before we see that next big.
I want to talk about that Caps death on the right-hand lane, because that will be his 7th isolated death. As far as the MSI group stage has gone, but I won't get a chance to, as there is going to be an engagement in the mid lane. Mickey's forced to flash defensively as the Black Shield's already been used. Jankos has already thrown out that ultimate. Just to go back, the tower will still stand. And just to mention, Caps obviously getting caught out and punished. He felt he had a little bit more breathing room. And those are the types of mistakes you've got to be very, very careful with at this level of play. SKT unable to find the kill on that engage.
The breathing room is at a very low level. We saw, for example, the Black Shield used on Perks, meaning that Mickey had flash. Mickey had flashes.
All right, that's a very big engagement. The Assaulted Battery comes down. Caps is caught out and killed where he stands. Now, the Dragon is still being focused and secured. A kill for a Dragon is sometimes worth, but look at the Pop Blossom. Faker stole that one. He's already found another onto Mickey. Mickey used the flash earlier. A Dragon for 2 kills is a bit more controversial.
That was ultimately a massive mistake from Caps. He tried to clear out a ward where he did not have priority. The rest of SKT had regrouped behind their tower. G2 members were on the Drake, and SKT now utilized this window to secure themselves 2 kills, a mid-tier 1, and close that gold gap.
And Vedius, was a bit of an unforced error, because remember, we saw the Morgana being forced to flash because they didn't have vision around the bot side river just a moment earlier. So it should have been 1+1, and that area would also be one where he could potentially be taken down. So the flow-on effect is a lot more immediate gold injected onto SKT, and the map state reversed a bit.
And the one thing you will note as well on this minimap, just as we're getting into the fight, you'll see how the rest of SKT are all grouped up towards the top side, but then Faker actually teleports to this ward right behind the rest of the team. That allows then SKT to know that they can continue for this fight because they're going to have a numbers advantage. So Mickey in this situation chooses to give up his life so that Wonder can walk away with his life.
A bit of a teamfight preview too. To me, the most high-value ability to steal with that Sylas ult will be the on-hit Nico ultimate. Ability power being stacked by Sylas, the potency of the burst means he could either dive and make that work or use it to peel for the Zyme.
Man, there's going to be so many interesting team fights, especially with all the options to build. I mean, if Faker steals the Soul Shackles, that's going to be hugely impactful as well. We've got 2 items now picked up for Teddy. He's got the Rapid Fire Cannon and the Essence Reaver. Rage Blade and Blade of the Ruined King sitting on the side of Wonder, who is still up 30 CS, by the way. He had a very strong early laning phase into Khan's Hecarim. And as it stands, I think that recall just finished from Mickey.
You'll notice as well that G2 actually have pushing top and bot right now. That's why Perks used his Whirling Death to clear out the mid wave so that G2 could just relieve the pressure, and now they actually have a good opportunity to reset, spend some of their gold, and pick up the items. You'll notice the Infinity Edge now done for the Draven, and the Raze Blade completed for Wonder as well.
A little bit of an exchange here. Caps has already used the perfect execution. Goes all the way back in with the flip. 5-point strike. Picks up a kill into Mata. Now Yanko's looking for the stun. That's a double kill for Caps. He flashes over the wall. But here comes Khan. Charges into him for devastating effect. Khan takes down Caps as the mid lane tower is being focused. Protobell from Faker just to clear the wave. Dark Binding will connect to Khan. And he gets taken down. On hit Nico running amok. G2 Esports wait for the minion line to conga in, and they might get some more damage in the tower.
And remember what we just talked about. G2 had priority on the side lanes. So the moment SKT split up to go and control it, that is when G2 strike, they found another pit.
Mickey fires the Dark Binding from out of vision, and Faker is caught out. Another tower and a gigantic lead for G2.
And these decisive picks are reminiscent of what we saw in the Pike game that G2 turned around. Speaking of...
All right, he's going to flash over, get caught out by the Vi ultimate, throws out the stand aside. Dark Shield, or Black Shield rather, will help out. But Summoner Spell blown, and 005, no license to kill for Perks yet, waiting to cash in on that Draven passive.
And it's stacking up bigger and bigger. The gold lead overall is 5,000 gold, and the swing would be insane if Perks was to pick up a kill. SKT had just found some picks to slow down G2's advance, but that slowing down was very short-lived.
And this is one of those situations where Caps' sacrifice was definitely worth it for G2. Trading a 2-for-1 and taking out the bot lane enabled so much control for G2 to then push in towards SKT's half of the map, and now they're the ones playing on the back foot. So you can see here, Caps utilizing the ultimate to close the gap, and then he's diving onto the duo.
Now, we were talking about how if G2 opened up with an aggressive play, that would really behoove them at this point. Caps shows the ultimate aggression between turrets. He gets back up from Yankos, but when SKT came, you thought there could be a turnaround. It was not.
Beautiful stuff there from Caps, and Yankos with the assist, but then we see the power of Mickey as well, landing two very crucial bindings. First one onto Khan, the second one onto Faker, enables G2 to now propel their gold lead back to about 5k.
5,500 gold to be specific. 4 towers to 3, 2 dragons to 1, 9 kills to 7. Every metric in favor of G2. And the gold advantage is the only one that is significant right now, but Klid has picked himself up that Guardian Angel. He's 3, 1, and 2 on that frontline Vi, and G2 Esports are now starting to group around, pushing Vision in the right-hand quadrant towards what looks to be the bottom inner turret. Teleport's available for Wonder, but he's actually sticking grouping with the team, so G2, they want to fight, Papa Smithy.
And the defensive positioning from SKT is okay because they have control over the Baron. They're not worried about G2 putting a train on it and taking it down quickly. The Drake spawning very shortly. SKT in full defensive position, and G2 walking up.
Ooh, here comes the Marta engage.
All right, that's at least a knock-up onto 1. That's potentially going to be a dead AD carry. Not yet. Caps actually manages to escape with his life. Klid's GA has been popped, and now Wonder is trying to solo out Khan. Onslaught of Shadows available, but it may need to get used defensively. Finally cashing in on the Draven passive. Plot Blossom comes up, will not find a stun. G2 Esports have got themselves one quick kill, and they forced SKT back.
Perks picks up 1,369 gold off the back of that kill. The stacks have finally been cashed in. He's sitting at almost 12,000 gold total, and now G2 are posturing around the Baron.
Klid is dead, but they do have a ward on the Baron, so we will not see G2 move over to that. Big pick there. Faker's actually in a huge flanking position, but who's flanking who?
Yeah, exactly. Hijack and Flash is available for Faker. Dark Binding will root him down. Pop Blossom is available, and G2 do not fight into Fog of War. I respect the patience this time around, content with the gold leads.
And the gold lead spiked so big. That's the Draven passive being cashed in, that huge asset climbing up a ceiling. SKT continue to back up, but G2 are in a really comfortable spot now. And while SKT has that initiation, one initiation goes wrong, the game could just end.
And I believe that it was SKT that tried to start the fight, as you were talking about, Papa Smithy. Their eyes were set on trying to kill Caps. Sitting on the front line, they thought that if they could just execute him, they would create a numbers advantage. And look how far up he's pushed in the lane. The eyes from SKT are like, hey, we can go for this, we can lock him down. If we kill him before he gets in the Shroud, then we've got him. So they go in. It's very telegraphed. But then notice this black shield that comes out from the side of Mickey. Flash in, just enough to keep him alive. And now it's Clid who's overextended.
And Khan's actually caught trying to come in for a further flank. It would have been disconnected anyways. It wasn't like Khan was complete on point with his flank timing. So SKT over-pursue from behind. And usually that ends up with more negatives than positives.
And of course, because Perks cashes in, he's already picked up the Phantom Dancer. So within about 2 and a bit minutes, iEdge, Phantom Dancer, Bloodthirster, and crucially, you can see all of the stopwatches. One for Jankos, Caps, as well as Perks. And I'm taking a look on the side of SKT. It is only Faker right now that has one.
And what we want to see from G2 is for them to parlay what we see from regular season G2 in a scenario like this. Keep their side laner in the side lane. Nico has itemized for the 1v1. Keep her there while playing the Baron game. Don't just roll up for a team fight, sort of thing that kind of proved to be IG's undoing.
Exactly that, Papa Smithy. This is the mid-game fans wanted to see, but now Caps may have been caught once again.
Oh, Caps manages to use that E to get out to safety. Manages to do so. Jankos throws down the ultimate as well. Caps level 15, not yet tier 3 ultimate. Turns his attention to Clid. Here comes Jankos, Perks and Mickey trying to make their way in. Wonder's going to be a little late to the party. Teddy's coming in from the backside of the fight as the Onslaught of Shadows splits up G2 Esports. Clid goes down though. It's a trade as now Marta's taken out. Damage onto Mickey. 2 for 1 thus far. But G2's death ball is rolling through SKT. Khan gets a devastating charge to reply one back. 3 for 2. G2 still in the advantageous position. Teddy's able to escape away from Wonder for now, and Wonder does not continue the chase. It is a matter of time here. Caps is looking to hunt down Khan. That's a flash forward into the 5-point strike. And just to get a couple more autos, and it's G2 with a convincing win.
G2 in position, and their target selection was more straightforward. Teddy had to open with ultimate to contribute any fight onto the team fight. With so many members down, G2 feeling strong enough to go onto Baron. And remember, this is an on-hit Nico. She shreds Baron.
Now Clid has just respawned. The pings are coming down. Marta and Clid are on their way, but can they secure the objective in time?
I don't think so. It's going to be too late unless Teddy can do something magical. No Featherstorm available. 2,000 hit points. This is an easy secure on the Baron. Teleport is being channeled now by SKT. G2 are retreating. They get the Baron and they get Faker's teleport. That is monumental, along with their 9,000 gold lead.
And I want to give props to SKT with how close this fight was, considering how much Teddy was actually zoned out of the fight. So notice Marta makes the initial mistake where he dodges out from the binding. Fortunately, he has a teammate there to get out with the E. Then Caps hard commits onto Clid, knowing that he's there. And it looks like once again that Caps is caught out of position. This is when the fight really kicks off.
Caps had used the second part of the ultimate. That's why they felt safe to go. But notice Teddy, like you mentioned, take the long way. And then Mickey could just ult him and keep him out of the fight longer. The Draven eventually falls down, but it's kind of the dying breath of Khan to take down Perks. And overall, the numbers game just comes up G2 and eventually nets them a Baron.
But in that choke point, Faker was also just doing so much damage. He was so valuable to the team that if they'd had a little bit more of a front line, if they could soak up a little more damage, they could have done more. But here's Faker.
Yeah, exactly. Faker's going to get run down here. Caps and Wonder looking to chase him out. Caps teleported in for this. Stolen Pop Blossom will not find a target. That would have hurt if it had hit. And Faker turns around, gets some lifesteal while that's going on. 3 members of G2 pushing down the bottom lane. Clid gets caught out by the prison from Sejuani. Now Jankos and Mickey continue to chase forward. Unstoppable onslaught used defensively. The tower is secured in favor of G2 Esports. They've got themselves the advantage once Wonder teleported in. Now the tower is being focused, and Caps will usher the mid lane minions to the inhibitor turret as well.
With the Baron buff on top of G2, who already sit at a monumental gold lead, SKT are just not strong enough to challenge them, and they're pushing onto the Nexus.
G2 Esports in a numbers advantage for 20 more seconds. Caps has no ultimate available. There goes the feathers. They're out and in. Marta's already running for his life. That's a shutdown onto Wonder. There is a reply. At least the GA is now secured as Clid's gone down. 8 seconds for Faker. Watch the death timers. Draven manages to get his second kill of the game, I believe, as now the Nexus turret is being focused. Faker is alive. He's back and in the fight. G2 Esports with Baron empowered. They haven't backed away yet. Spinning axes will connect, and the teleport now being channeled by Khan. Unstoppable Onslaught's not available, but it might not be needed. That's an interrupt. Devastating charge delivers Perks into the back line. There goes Faker, chasing down the Perks. Perks stays alive for now. Can't find the next axe. All of a sudden, though, it's a 1-for-1. Support for AD. Jankos, as well as Caps, get themselves a reply back. Now Caps turns his attention to Khan. Faker's running low. He needs to get some regen. Whoa! He is popped by Caps. Caps is throwing out every single ability and turning his attention to Khan. It's a quadra kill for Caps and G2.
G2 Esports hold the line as the rest of SKT mount one last defense, but it is not enough. G2 look to equalize the series.
12,000 gold advantage as a dark binding from Mickey should just about seal the deal. Caps goes all the way to the steps of the fountain for a pentakill as G2 equalize the series at 1-1.
And that means that we have oh so much to play for. They're going to kill some minions. It's going to take their time in ending this game. G2 Esports come out, they're bold, and they deserve their victory.
And the first pentakill of the mid-season Invitational 2019 lands in Caps' back pockets.
Wonder got one earlier as well.
There we go. Stats fed me that. That's right, and then lost the game.
He did lose the game.
2 pentakills for G2. There we go.
Nailed it.
The one thing I did like, G2's mid-game. Decisive, proactive, and kind of what we're used to seeing for G2.
To me, it felt like that there was that one moment. You talk so much about it, Papa Smithy, where once these item breakpoints come through, will SKT look to go for the fight? They tried to force one in the mid lane where they tried to shut down Caps. The execution wasn't quite there. And then the moment that Draven picked up that bounty, it was too difficult for SKT to mount a comeback.
Exactly. They get the one go with Trinity Force and all the items shopped, but it's amazing how we were building towards something and we knew it was going to see so one way or the other. Crucially, G2 kept their heads clear after a Game 1 loss and after an extended pause and took down SKT where they stood.
The teams that seem to get priority in the laning phase that get an advantage then seem to just win the game.
Yep.
Like, Game 1 felt that way. Game 2 sort of felt the way.
Yep.
Albeit a little bit more unrefined. A couple of small mistakes here and there for G2. But now it goes back to SKT side selection.
Yes.
And we have to start seeing now both sides have to provide answers to their opponents.
And that was something I wanted to bring up because how does G2 pivot going back to red? Because something we talked so extensively about was coming into the game, they clearly had a red side plan and then they pivoted. And then their pivot was not as effective as what they wanted. So do they go back to their original Game 1 plan? Do they have something new prepared?
Well,
the draft only gets more exciting between these two sides.
We will find out a little later. For more, though, on the results of Game 2, let's throw to Shux, Azel, and Raz.
Thank you very much. Breathe out for me at least after that Game 1. Luckily for G2 Esports, a much better showing in this Game 2. Now, we, of course, due to the extended pause, already covered a lot of this, but I do want to highlight some things from the early parts of this game, because for me, the fact that Jankos did so well was so integral to the lead that G2 got.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think especially the fact that he is going up against Clid after how Game 1 looked. It wasn't just Perks put behind in Game number 1. Jankos got 3 buffed. He got put very far behind. And in this game on the Sejuani, he was everywhere. He was matching Clid blow for blow. And at times, coming out very far ahead in some of these trades on a superior team fighting jungler. And, in those later stages, SKT really wasn't able to touch him.
And that moment right there really is heartbreaking. Just one auto attack at least from getting a kill on towards Morgana. And you're right, the fact that Jankos was able to match the Vi so consistently. This, to me, was even more heartbreaking for G2 because G2 could have just won the game off that if Wonder didn't go in early, because that was a doomed state for Khan in the wave. The wave was huge. It was piling up. He really couldn't do much about that. But, of course, even with that mistake, Jankos was able to still pick it up in the bottom side of the map.
And I think that's a positive because you look at all these things that could happen in this series and you think about Wonder versus Khan possibly, you think about Caps possibly, but we didn't really put too much stock into Jankos being able to outplay Clid, and one game does not a series make, but it is a positive sign.
It's a very positive sign, and this is also, now puts a little bit more question on the draft because there was so much attention to the jungle champion pool in the ban phase. There were so many bans thrown that way. So many champions were taken off the table. And if you feel that you can answer this Vi, I mean, they picked Vi into Morgana, which is such a strong answer in the team fight. So it then becomes about winning in side lanes, as Kobe was talking about during the pause, and also winning in the early game away from that Morgana, which they weren't able to do. So this is something that G2 could look to replicate.
And also the Morgana proved to be so important with Caps' Akali in combination with that. And I do want to take some time to talk about Caps because he plays on a knife's edge, and sometimes he cuts himself with it. And I think this replay is just going to show that sometimes it's too much, but it can also pay out hugely if it does succeed.
Exactly. If you can play on that tightrope, in this situation didn't have the members to work out, but when you see moments like these, just take a look at how he's able to outplay both of the CCs, just dive straight in towards it, get the kill, and drop out with the Morgana shield right on top of him.
Yeah, I mean, the Shuriken flip right before the Zai ultimate comes through so he can follow down afterwards. And this is what I love about a player like Caps. You have to take the good with the bad.
Yeah.
Because for you to be able to make that play, you're going to have some where you're looking a little bit silly too, right? That is so aggressive. That is so impressive. But he's able to pull off team fights like this. And that is why I think Caps, maybe more than any other mid laner in this tournament, can push an advantage to heights that we don't usually see. Because he's willing to risk the game on a play like that. And when it works out so damn well.
And that's why I don't want to see him on freaking Morgana. Give me a Kali, man.
You don't see those sick Morgana outplays?
No,
The black
I want
shield?
to use. Yeah, no, for Mickey, that's fine. But no, here we also see it. We were actually discussing heavily who the player of the game should be because Jankos had such an insane game. But I'm sorry, when you get that pentakill, you do turn into our MasterCard player of the game most of the time.
Yeah, and it says a lot to this team because in this game, once again, strategically, Jankos played super well.
Yeah.
It is so tough for Klid, who you would say is the MVP of the tournament up until this point, where he picks the Vi, and a lot of people, looks at that game and would say, okay, Vi into Morgana, why? But like, there's a Hecarim, there's a Rakan. Strategically, if SKT has a lead, Morgana finds it incredibly impossible to ever deal with the Vi if she plays it safe with her ultimate. But the fact that Jankos controlled Vi up until that like 10-minute point, then you have no way actually to enter in any of these fights.
Yeah, exactly. A Vi who's not ahead is not going to be able to threaten, one shot on this Draven. Yes, there was the Hecarim to also dive there, but they were never able to really get that going. And I think that was largely in part to the contributions of Caps. It wasn't just about the pentakill. It's about that mid lane dive, which not only got them those 2 kills, got them additional kills, got them the mid lane turret, the jungle fight in which he's drawing so much pressure. And that is because he's willing to play so aggressively and depend on his ability to outplay a lot of these fights. And I think he has been such a fantastic player for G2 when he is on, and he certainly was in game 2.
Yes, and now we have 1-1. It's all squared up, and it almost makes us forget that first game that was so bad, but we have to remember the mistakes that G2 made in that game as well. And we can't just swipe them under the rug because of this game. So let's look ahead to game 3. SKT chose blue side. What adaptations are going to come in, or do you think they do not have to change anything particularly about the draft?
I think the most important thing, and I know the desk hit the flex picks coming into this series, it's important. Akali was the first the blue side pick here. I think Galio is something that I would love to see come in enter the series, just because in a lot of these situations where Akali is so dominant, teamfight Galio just works out so well to be able to clear the area. So I would love to see that be the first pick here.
How did this game change your perception of how the rest of the series is going to go, Azale?
Not a lot, because I didn't put a lot of stock in game number 1. I think that SKT got massively ahead off of the early game, and then they were able to stomp through, right? But that did not diminish my confidence in G2. I think that they're a very strong team, and we saw much more of what they can show here in game 2. So I think we're going to have a really competitive series.
100%. Like me coming into this one, I predicted that it was going to be 3-2 in favor of G2. I think this goes the distance, and I've heard like the sentiment from the crowd out here, or just the people on social media, that they can see it going both ways. I think adaptation is crucial. Even though I mentioned Galio being something that I would expect the series to go towards, I certainly see that if Caps is coming out strongly with the Akali pick, I don't necessarily believe it's going to be a ban. But if you're banning Jace and Akali on Jace or Ryze on red side, then you have to stop somewhere.
Yeah, it's becoming very, very interesting and dicey here in Taipei. But we will take a quick break. When we come back, game 3 of SKT versus G2. Don't go anywhere.
Now Mata sitting on that flash still. Gotta be very careful, those spinning axes doing work. Jankos gets the shield. Here comes Faker too. Jankos is sitting waiting in wings. Pop Blossom comes on, buys some time. Jankos comes in with the ulti. That's the first, but there's a reply already. Jankos has already thrown down the ulti and Khan has arrived to the fight. There goes Caps. Mata is down. Caps has already used the perfect execution. Goes all the way back in with the flip. 5-point strike. Picks up a kill into Mata. Now Jankos looking for the stun. That's a double kill for Caps. He flashes over the wall.
Rocket. Silas. I will kill Silas myself.
Caps goes all the way to the steps of the fountain for a pentakill as G2 equalize the series at 1-1.
So Josh, you going for our Drive Safe and Safe discount?
Yep, using the app, driving safe. You wanna go? You wanna go, bro? Hey, do not mess with my discount. Woo! You can save up to 30%. Let's go! Nice to meet you. Go get him, Tiger.
Woo! Sounds like you've got this.
Yeah, definitely.
Get a discount up to 30% with Drive Safe and Save from State Farm.